Hello viewers, I hope you are doing well and welcome back to my YouTube channel The Movie Master 92 and welcome back to another video. In the last episode, we'll look at how Mr. Darcy became a prisoner of his own isolation and periods. But if you thought he was the only complicated character in this story, you were very wrong. Today, we're talking about Elizabeth Bennet. She is widely regarded as the gold standard of wit and perceptiveness. But what if I told you that her intelligence became a trap? Elizabeth, a perfect example of how confidence is your ability to read people can become the very thing that builds you. While Darcy was battling his ego, Lizzie was battling Platon. She had believed herself. Today we are going to look at how confirmations based work, why a sharp mind makes us more acceptable to manipulate like Wickham, and how our own mental filter lead us excuse some people of everything, will hold others to an impossible standard. Welcome to part 2 of our psychology breakdown of Pride and Prejudice. If Mr. Darcy is a paranoid type, Elizabeth Bennet is a classic motive. A motive are people with a high emotional sensitive and a deep need for genuine human connection. They read the mood of those around them with remarkable precision and feel things intensely, but the same sensitivity in their vulnerability. A powerful first impression literally streamed itself into their perceptions and became extremely difficult to revise. When the paranoid type built a wall out of a principle, the emotive built a wall out of wooden feeling and defended it with no less determination. Elizabeth is vivid, ironic, and unlike Darcy, she genuinely needs authentic human connection. And yet there is no one key feature that marks a deep similarity in their worldview, a powerful internal frame of reference. Lizzie, like Darcy, is the habit of relying exclusively on her own judgment. She decided who is guilty and delivered her verdict herself. But it is important to understand that her bias did not appear out of nowhere. At their very first meeting, at the bell, Darcy committed a felt error. He did not merely behave coldly, he said out loud that Lizzie was not attractive enough to dance with. Elizabeth heard it. Her pride was wounded. As she later admitted herself, she could easily have given his organs if he had not hurt her personality. That was the critical moment. Her internal frame of reference received what felt like cast iron perform of the insufficient character, grounded in direct personal experience. That incident became the foundation from confirmation bias. Her mind shifted instantly into cognitive economy mode, having encountered his contempt once she felt Darcy under alert snob. From that point of any negative information about him was not evaluated from adversary is simply settled into already prepared ground. She began collected his failure as evidence, each one a fresh confirmation of her own perception, and their envy is there. The sharper the mind, the more sophisticated its ability to justify its own error, turning a bias into unshakable truth. This is where Wickham enters the story. Primary antagonists are the Darcy exact opposite when it comes to first impression. But his success with Elizabeth cannot be explained by personal charm alone. What kicked in at full force here in the halo effect. Wickham is handsome, socially forlorn, and possessive, the manner of a perfect gentleman. Our brain are lazy. If we like someone's appearance and find them pleasant company, we automatically assign them other positive qualities: honesty, obediently, integrity. For Elizabeth, whose mind was already actively searching for evidence of Darcy's villainy, Wickham with his ready-made heroes Hello was the idea source. The real artist of the emulations lay in her skillfully we more lace together with truth. Wickham understood that belong. We need to anchor was stored in verifiably effect. He drew on widely known details about old Mr. Darcy will and various legal arrangement, but gave them his own destroyed interpretation. He did not over-dramatize and he did not cast himself as a silently merely. He released information is careful does with an air of dignified source. This disturbed Elizabeth's critical instinct entirely. The accounts seemed too smific and too plausible to be in violation. To fully understand how Elizabeth based operated. We need to look at her reaction to Mr. Collars. Collars is Darcy's absolute opposite, an action type driven entirely by excellent reference. He does not take a single step without changing it against the opinion of his opportune Lady Catherine. For Lizzie, he is a working absolutely and executable source of material for her will. And her we witness a struggling psychological double stand in action where her close friend Clotter Lucy accepts Collion's proposal. Lizzie is generally outraged. She judged Crowley entirely by her own internal standards. How can every marry without love or respect? To Elizabeth, this is a battle of principle. She is so blinded by her own sense of how the world ought to work that she refuses to engage with Charlotte actually reality. For whom his marriage is the only available route of a dependency and into some form of security. But look at what happened when Wickham finds himself in an analogous situation. The moment is become now that he has a boundaries lazy and began personally misking for her then £1,000. Elizabeth demonstrated a remarkable flexibility. She defends him. She says that handsome young men also have to eat. This is a textbook cast on group favoritism. Those who like or mistakenly feel are no side. We excuse for everything, constantly perfectly logical justification, while those we dislike or find irritating, we hold to the strictest possible standard, with no mitigated circumstances allowed. Elizabeth defined Wickham because to admit his mercenary motives would to be admit that her celebrate insinuations had failed her again. She is prepared to dramatic her friendship with sharpless by sizing her choice, but she clung to the illusion of Wickham nobility united to the very end, because that illusion is filling her ego. To understand why Elizabeth trusts her own judgment so absolutely, we need to look at the system she grew up inside. The Bennet householder is a constant source to social tension, and Lizzie's long ego became its sharpest and most clear-eyed observer. Her perceptiveness has been held to find it because it is the only readable tool for negativity, a space where everyone around her is in some way behaving badly. Consider how quality she saw thought the Bingley sisters. While society admired their polished manner, Lizzie immediately identified there. She could see that their warmth toward Jane was a thin veneer, concealing their complete for this family's social standing. For Caroline Bingley and their sister, a match between their brother and Jean was unexpected message. They had no intention of becoming connected to people whose manner and positions they found beneath them. Elizabeth saw clearly the gap between what they said and what they did, and every time she was proved right, her faith in our own ability to read people was reinforced at home. Meanwhile, she was surrounded by figures who offered exercise for that critical Lydia and Kitty area in a sense, dark reflections of their two elder sisters. If Kitty is entirely dependent on Lydia herself is all tartness and vulgar officer hunting. Everything that they restrain and consider Jane is not. And then there is their mother, who is exactly about their daughter's future, express itself in behavior that is socially mortifying. This is often read as simple stupidity, but psychologically, it is a class example of an action type operating under survival conditions. Her obsessed dramatization to ego law daughter married is not vanity or foolishness. It is only strategy available to her for keeping her family from poverty. But for all her sharpness, Lizzie was a prisoner of her own isolation. She simply had no one to taking things thought with as an equal. Her closer person, Jane's, was too gentle and too charitable. She refused to see the worst in anyone and was always ready to find a reason to excuse any behavior. The result was that Lizzie grew accustomed to treating her own perspective as the only accurate one, since Jane was too soft-hearted to notice the ugliness in people, and everyone else in the family was too absorbed in themselves. The final blow came through her father. Miss Bennet was the only person whose intelligence she respected without reservation, but as the story unfolds, she is forced to see the uncomfortable truth. His sarcasm is simply a mechanism for avoiding responsibility. What is become clear after the conversation about Lydia's trip up Brighton. Thus, the simple does not care through the prevent it, and it appeared to risk the family reputation for the sake of their own peace. Lizzie understood with finality on the question that actually mattered. She is internally of her own. Pride and Prejudice is not simply a classic love story. It is the story of how two strong intellect found the courage to admit that their picture of the world was broken. Darcy has to dismantle his information bubble. His journey is a lesson for everyone who believes that status, wealth, of the right background gave him a monopoly on truth. To see the real Elizabeth, he had to acknowledge that his standards were not universal law, they were his own personal limits. In the modern world, we are all a little bit Darcy. Social media algorithm field as only what we already agreed with, creating the illusion that the whole world thinks as we do. Getting out that the bubble is always painful, but is the only road back to reality. Elizabeth, meanwhile, had to face her confirmation bias. Her story is a mirror for her own time, where we label someone of the basis of a single phrase or a look we did not like, and then filter out any evidence that conduct and verdict. We believe charming manipulate like Wickham because they tell you what our wrestling plan, and we judge pragmatic like charmer because they're honestly struck as too unsentimental. The central lesson of both parts is simple. Our brains are lazy instruments that are constantly typing to head as an easy answer instead to difficult truth. Darcy and Elizabeth did not find happiness because they were perfect for each other. They found it because they were capable of genuine self-reflection. They managed to process and ask themselves, what if I am wrong? In a world where everyone is determined to be right cost, the most useful thing you can do is sometimes find courage to admit your own bias. Because real perceptiveness begins out with the ability to see thought other people, but with the ability to notice the blind spot in yourself. And if your critical mind is telling you that the breakdown was worth your time, press that perfectly reasonable instruction like subscribe and tell us in the comment how do you think was more better in the story, Darcy with his classic bound organs, or Lazy with her faith in our own infallible judgment? Or do you think Charlotte Loss was the only truly rational person in the whole affair? See you in the next one.